to Panels and Borders. I'm Dominic, and this is a special edition episode of Road to Dune. So a few months back, I put out the call to bring someone on my channel and discuss Dune and the upcoming Dune film. So someone answered me, I got an email, and I talked to the person for a little while over email, and we finally got a chance to hook up over Discord on the weekend, and we had a really good discussion about Dune. Now, the discussion is an hour and a half. So I decided to split it up into 3 segments. So this is the first segment in this video here. Now, just to give everyone a heads up, there's 2 spots in this segment where our voices have an echo. Now, I used OBS to record the audio, and I'm not sure exactly what caused the echo. It's something I'm still looking into, so hopefully it'll something I can get straightened out for stuff like this in the future. So just to make you aware, that's in this segment. The person that I'm doing this podcast with is someone who's viewed quite a few of my Dune videos and commented on a few of them, and they go by the username of Proncus. So I want to give a shout out to that viewer, and I want to thank Proncus for coming on my channel. And we had a really good discussion. His knowledge of movies is pretty vast, and he has a lot of insight, and he has a lot of knowledge on how movies are made and put together and stuff, because he went to film school and that. So it's a really fascinating discussion that we had, and so I hope you find it really interesting. So without any further delay, here is our discussion about Denis Villeneuve's Dune and just Dune in general. All right, there we go. So, where do you want to start this conversation? Do you want to start with the new film?
I was going to ask you the same question, actually, because there's lately, watching more of your videos, I got interested in the whole political discussion. I know there's a lot of viewers who don't want to take that discussion, but I think it's important to at least recognize that that it is a concern that needs to be raised from a production level.
Yeah, well, that's fair. Yeah, well, that's a good way to start. So we'll start with that first topic. Now, just before we get into that, though, let's because we kind of talked a little bit over email about how we both got into Dune. So why don't we just kind of, for anyone who's listening, let's talk about how we both got into Dune and how we became fans. So I'll let you go first with that. Like, how did you get into the Dune books, and like, how did you discover Dune?
Sure. Yeah. It started way back in, I think, somewhere around the early mid-90s with the original Dune game from, I think 93 or such. My older brother brought it home from the local library. And I was just very fascinated with the way that the game presented its world. I thought it was a very fascinating world, and I heard that, there are monsters under the sands and stuff. And then I later heard there was a movie, and it's on a VHS tape at my brother's friend's house. And that sort of became like this relic that I just had to get my hands on, just to let me dive deeper into this world. At this point, I was like 6 or 7 years old, and I started watching this David Lynch movie at 6 or 7 years old. It scared me a lot, but it also is something like it was nothing like I'd ever seen before, and I found it incredibly fascinating. And then by chance, I found the book in the basement of a friend's house, who his dad actually had it from his younger days, and he let me have it, and that's how I got into the book. I did try and read it when I was like 12.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But it was a horrible translation, and it's only later that the story's grown on me as I've grown up, and it's kind of followed me throughout my years. And it was my first fandom ever, even before Star Wars or anything like that.
Oh, really? Well, that's interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of my journey. How about you?
Well, how I got into it like. So here in Canada, they used to have the First Choice Superstation on cable for movies. So each month they would have a set schedule of movies that would play throughout that month, and then the next month they would have a different roster. So I always had what they called peasant view. So that's like 2 channels. That's it. CBC and NTV, and that's it. So, but my friend, he had, his parents had cable, and they had First Choice Superstation. So I was down there, and just happened when I was at his place, the movie Dune was on First Choice. So that would have been probably like 85 maybe. So I watched it, and I was pretty young, so maybe 6, 7 years old, and it just like, I found it like, same thing, like really fascinating, because it was completely different from Star Wars. And so like I found the movie very fascinating and watched it, and then kind of forgot about it afterwards, and then saw it in the video stores every now and then for rent. And then when I was in like my early teens, I rented the movie, watched it. When I watched it that time, I didn't really care for it. I thought it was kind of boring and didn't seem as fascinating as when I was younger. And then as I got older, I watched it again, like in my later teens, and then kind of grew on me and kind of found more of an appreciation for it. But I didn't know it was based on a book. I didn't know about the book until I was, my late teens, like 17 or 18. And I was just happened to be in a used bookstore and saw the books, and then realized, well, this was a series of books. So then when I was probably around like 22, 21, 22, I joined the science fiction book club, and I was like a mail order service. You could order books through it and stuff. And one of the books they had in one of the month was Dune. So I ordered it through there and read the book and just was blown away by the book. Just loved the book. And then right after that, ordered the next one, Dune Messiah, and then just kept going through all the original 6 books. And then at that point, the Brian Herbert books were out. So I read the House books, the prequel books, and then the Machine War books, and then they released like Hunters of Dune and Sandworms of Dune. So I read those 2 books. And that's about as far as I got with the books. So I read all the books, and then the miniseries came out, watched that. So it really like kind of the fandom for me. It slowly grew over time and snowballed to the point now where like it's my all-time favorite science fiction novel. I probably read it 4 times now, the original Dune, and I've recently reread the second book, Dune Messiah. So I'm just going to slowly work my way through the 6 original books that Frank Herbert wrote, and so that's how I arrived at it. So then, then I found out they were doing a film, and then the reason I started talking about it on my YouTube channel, I was going to actually start talking about Star Wars, but there were so many channels doing Star Wars stuff. Like, so I was like, and I was just kind of tired of hearing about Star Wars, because I was like, I don't want to just be one more channel that's going to be complaining about Star Wars. So instead I decided, no one's talking about Dune, and still no one's really talking about this new Dune film on YouTube, none of the other YouTubers. Right,
exactly.
So I decided I'm going to talk about Dune. And then I honestly didn't think it was going to do as well as it did, and I didn't think each video would get so many hits, so I was kind of surprised. So I just made it a thing. I'm just going to go along, and each news story comes out, I'm just going to chronicle the whole thing right up until the movie comes out. Because I've been kind of had my eye on a new Dune film for at least over 10 years, because the first time I heard of a new big budget Dune film coming out was probably, I would say, 2007. But then it would always, something would happen, they'd lose a director, or could seem like it could never get going. So finally now it seems like it is.
Yeah. I heard about it like a long time ago as well. And I heard they had other directors on it, like Neil Blomkamp was in talks at one point. And as much as I like District 9, I think he's kind of got one shtick, and it's kind of been done to death by now. So, and I think by now they like, Denis is like the perfect director for an incredible amount of reasons. I could talk about that for hours.
I totally agree. He seems, because I'm a big Blade Runner fan too, and when I heard you were making a sequel to that, I thought, that's going to be no good. But I had seen his first film. I seen one of Villeneuve's movies was Arrival, and I had actually read the short story it was based on back in like 1999. And then, so I went, before I went and seen the movie, I went back because it came in like an anthology book. So I went and reread the short story again, and then went and seen the movie, and I thought, wow. And when I saw, okay, this guy's doing Dune, I was really impressed with the Arrival. And I said, okay, yeah, this is this is the right guy for Dune. Then I seen Blade Runner 2049, and because I was very skeptical, because a lot of times when they make sequels to movies that took place so long ago, like it never really fits, but when I saw that movie, I was like, wow, this is just as good as the first Blade Runner movie. I just loved it and bought it as soon as it came out on Blu-ray.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
Same thing here. Also a huge Blade Runner fan. I think Blade Runner is like in my top 5 movies of all time. I think Denis he kept a lot of the themes interesting, while not just seeming to develop on it because he needed to. It felt like the story developed upon the themes because there was actual meat on the bone, so to speak, to dive into, and the film was incredibly rich in terms of subtext and themes, and it's every time I watch it by now, I discover a new layer. So I think it's one of the best sequels that we've had in like decades. I think.
Yeah, I think so too. It's
quite incredible.
It is a very good sequel, and just when you go and watch the movie, just the visuals alone in that movie, I think, are gorgeous. When I saw that, I said, thinking about the visuals in Blade Runner, I thought, yeah, this is really gonna. I think this guy's visual scope is going to really translate well for the world of Dune.
Yeah, actually, about that, I think there's a lot of the art team on IMDb right now that seems to be very much the same teams that he had for things like Arrival and Blade Runner. So while the cinematographer is a new guy that we can also get into, I think the art team this is good stuff. And continuing on that, I think actually the sound team, I think there's a lot of people from Blade Runner as well.
Yeah.
And they had a very mechanical approach to how to make a sci-fi world sound in Blade Runner. It was very much like a physical approach. It was not the classic bleep bleeps and like crazy warbly sci-fi computer noises. And I think that's going to work very well for a Dune film in a world where computers are basically outlawed. I'm very interested in seeing how they're going to work with it, not just visually, but also in terms of sound. Because I think Denis had the right approach in Blade Runner, and I think he can repeat a lot of the stuff he did in terms of sound and art from both Arrival and from Blade Runner.
Yeah, he did. I think so too. He's done a good job, and yeah, you can see a lot of the same crew. I mean, they changed. Yeah, that's true. They did change cinematographers. They got the guy. His name's kind of on the tip of my tongue, but he did.
Greg Fraser, I think.
Yeah, Greg Fraser. Yes, and he was the cinematographer on Rogue One.
Yeah, I actually rewatched Rogue One in preparation for this talk.
Oh, did you?
I've been incredibly excited about coming on. Actually, because none of my friends have read Dune. None of my friends have a real relationship with Dune to the degree that I have. None of them have read the book, so I got a lot on my chest.
Yeah,
so it's very nice. Yeah, but yeah, I rewatched. Also, Zero Dark 30 that Greg Fraser also did, just to see his previous work as a cinematographer, and he also did Lion with what was that actor's name? The Indian guy who played the main part in Slumdog Millionaire as well.
Oh, okay.
Patel, I think, Dev Patel. And Greg Fraser's cinematography is very different from Roger Deakins, but he's very good, I think. Where Roger Deakins is more of a painter, he's more of an artist. I think Greg Fraser has more of a he's like the photographer, like a really good photographer of National Geographic. He's more of a describer, an observer, more so than Roger Deakins is. And he's very good at grounding you in the world just through the visuals and working with the details in both foreground, middle ground, background. He gives his world a lot of depth through that visual style. Yeah. And I think he's also very good at working with. He's very fond of working with silhouettes, I find, which has me kind of intrigued about how he's going to introduce the Baron.
Yeah.
We all remember that chapter.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's something I'm very much looking forward to.
Okay, well then that's now that you brought up the Baron, that's a good segue into the political end of this.
Oh yeah.
That we talked about. So yeah, okay, I guess I'll go first on that. So I don't now this just seems to be the climate nowadays. Everything is so political now, like movies and comic books and all that. And now I know it's always been like I'm not like I realize films has always a lot of movies have always had a political slant one way or the other. I think that's just human nature. People who write movies and stuff, they're going to put a lot of their own personality into their own work. So I think that's just going to come out.
Oh yeah.
But so the article that I saw on I did the last video I did about the Baron, and is now I don't think it's going to happen because he's never caved into that sort of pressure before with the previous films, because I know Blade Runner 2049 took some heat when it came out, similar articles to that one about the Baron. So, but it just seems like he just went and done his thing anyway. And I think if you're a filmmaker or writer, because there's no way you can second guess what's going to offend some certain group anywhere, so you just kind of have to do what you think is best and go forward. That's how I see it. But I would expect more articles like that to come up as it gets closer, as it gets, now that it's becoming more, because it was kind of going under the radar there for quite a while, and but now that you're seeing the bigger names getting cast and stuff like that, like Zendaya and Oscar Isaac, now you're going to see more and more articles come out like that. So what's your take on all that?
Yeah, it's a complicated issue, and I know a lot of people don't like having that conversation at all.
No.
I saw, not to call out anybody, but I think that there are people out there who think that as soon as you start taking into account political correctness, then it stops being art. Mm-hmm. And I can see where they're coming from. I can see why that is a thing people are saying.
Yeah,
but I don't think it's entirely that simple. I think my philosophy in terms of film, because I've gone to some film education in the past. I went to the European Film College in Denmark, and I've been studying it for years and stuff like that. But yeah, the film is not only art, especially when we get to productions of this magnitude.
Yeah.
It's one thing my teachers told me is that it's 50% art, 50% craft. And I think that's very true to some extent. And you can never quite make something that's 100% art in film, because there's still the craftsmanship of actually putting it together.
Yeah.
And even then, I think there's also quite a large part of it in productions like this that's going to have to be on the business side. Mm-hmm. And when you're doing multi-million-dollar productions like this one, you have to take care of what the audience wants. It might not be something we like to talk about. It might not be something that we agree with, but it needs to happen in order to have productions of this scale even take place in the first place.
Yeah.
So I think it's, as long as they keep the intentions of each aspect of the story intact, I'm okay with them changing a few things.
Yeah.
I think we maybe lose the homoerotic, rapey tendencies the Baron has towards Paul Atreides. But I think that's, in terms of the market on the big scale, I don't think that's a huge sacrifice if you want to make sure that this is a successful film and we can see more films in the series later on.
Yeah. Yeah, because that was only in the original 1984, that was like slightly hinted at. And then I didn't even, because I watched the original Dune like a few times before I read the book, and honestly, I never even picked up on it. It went right over my head until I read the novel. And then I went back and watched the movie, because there's a lot of stuff from the book that's in that 84 film, but it's subtle. You don't pick up on right away until you read the book, then you go back. And that was one of the things that was like kind of subtly put in there. And I went back and rewatched it, and I was like, oh, okay, now I get it. And but the miniseries actually went more into that than the 84.
I like how the miniseries handled it, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because they kept it in the subtext.
Yeah, they did.
where the original David Lynch film kind of took the sick sexuality of the Baron into like a different direction that was also sick, but it was sick for different reasons that were more relatable to a broader audience in the modern world, which was his enjoyment of killing people.
Yeah.
And I think that was actually not a bad change. There was a lot of other things about the Baron that they changed that a lot of people disagree with, and for good reason, I think. But I think that was one of the decent ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the other thing about Dune is it has its own like internalized politics, like fictional politics in there, but it has like the message overall, kind of like political message of it is like very universal. So it applied the day it came out, and it still applies today about people putting their faith and giving up their faith and their power into a leader. And and then the kind of like what the disastrous outcomes that can have, and that can go. I mean, you can look at that as a metaphor for like a political leader, like president, or something like that. But also, you can scale that back down to even like your personal life. How many times people have been put their faith in like a teacher or some kind of instructor or some kind of a figurehead they put a lot of faith into and kind of prop this person up in their own mind, only to be either betrayed somehow or let down somehow by that person, or have it have some kind of disastrous consequence. So I kind of like the theme of that story, where it kind of warns about giving up your own power to leaders, and that can certainly apply today. And it applied like the day it was written in.
Yeah, I think that's an interpretation that I hadn't thought about actually. Like there's so much in terms of the original novel that I think you can say there's a lot of messages, and I think that's definitely one of them. It's always been hard for me to actually boil it down to like a single message with a novel.
Yeah.
Because there's just so much in terms of ecology, a man's relationship with physical reality and things like that. And some interesting power balances that I just think are interesting from a dramatic perspective. But one thing I'm gonna be curious about is like, because they're gonna need to cut some of that stuff out. And what message are they gonna focus on in the film? Because I think you have to narrow down your purpose of the story. You have to narrow that down a little bit in a film. Like you can't have the liberties that they have in a novel.
Yeah, you can't.
Yeah. So I'm going to be interested in seeing what the focus of the film is, what perspective they choose to have.
Yeah, well, that will be interesting. Now, my one worry about this is, so Dune is very different from Star Wars in the fact that Star Wars was intentionally designed for a mass audience, where Dune isn't. So my worry is, because I know they're making two separate films. The first book is going to be two separate films, so I'm hoping like the first movie comes out and it doesn't play well. Like it, with general audience, just doesn't know what to make of it, don't know what it is, and it, you know what I mean? That's my worry about this. So how do you think this is going to do? Like, how do you think this is going to play off to like the general audience?
It's something I'm still thinking about, actually. I don't have a clear answer. I've been watching a few interviews with Denis to see how he approaches stories. And he seems to be very interested in like the mysteries within the stories. And I think he's got to have a lot of mysteries in Dune to play with, whether or not we choose to look at it from the outside of Paul, like how does a character like Paul work, or if we're going to look into other mysteries that are revealed in the book. But yeah, in terms of audiences, it's a tough one. It's a really tough one. But I think Denis, like I said before, he's going to have to choose like just a few points, and then hint at the rest through his world building. That I think, which I think is why Greg Fraser is actually a really good choice for this, because along like Denis, he did world building excellently with Roger Deakins in Blade Runner, and I think with a cinematographer like Greg Fraser, he can create a very, very believable world. And I think that's going to be fascinating for audiences. I hope that that's going to mean that audiences are going to want to return to it, and might be enticed by it just from a marketing perspective.
Yeah.
And also the popularity of Game of Thrones. I think they're going to need to appeal a little bit to that, because I see a lot of people relating Dune to something like Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I've seen that too, yeah.
Yeah, so the super popularity of Game of Thrones and the kind of drought of content that we've had over there, I think maybe they can play off of that a little bit.
Yeah. No, I'm really, really rooting for the film, because I find now modern films, especially nowadays, it is so flooded with superhero movies. Now, I do like the Marvel films and stuff. I'm a comic book fan and all that. But at the same time, it's kind of nice to have something that's not just kind of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Something that's a little bit more deeper, for lack of a better term. You know what I mean? Something that when you leave the theater really makes you think. Because I kind of enjoy those types of films. So that concludes the first segment of our discussion on Dune. So I hope everyone who listened enjoyed that segment, and I'll try to get the other two up as soon as I can when I'm done editing, and I hope you'll enjoy those segments as well. So let me know what you think in the comments section, and I will see you at the next one. Thank you to all of my subscribers, and thank you for watching this video. And if you're new to the channel, like, subscribe, and share. And don't forget to hit the bell icon for notification when new videos are uploaded.